Good morning, my fellow explorers and treasure hunters. Today I'd like to talk about something that is of great interest to many people, and I think it needs to be revisited. I think that it's been covered before, but I don't think anybody's done a very good job of examining all the information or the details. Also, I have information that other people or interests may not have access to. And some of this information has come to us from sources outside of the cited sources from the internet. We have three sources outside of anything you're going to find on the internet that tells us that there's something of value, a cavern, a treasure cave, a society, or something inside or around the Grand Canyon area. Anyway, I want to examine some of that information today, go into a little bit more detail, and actually take apart the document, the newspaper article that G.E. Kincaid, that was a result of supposed G.E. Kincaid's expedition through the Grand Canyon. So first of all, G.E. Kincaid, I believe it was in 1907, was the time of his expedition, 1907, 1908. I think the article that came out in the Phoenix Gazette came out in 1909, if my memory serves me. In a minute I'm going to log on to the internet and read a few things directly off of that article, and also go over Google Earth and trace out some of his measurements and some of the elevation markers and pinpoint precisely on the Grand Canyon, on the Colorado River, where he would have been, what location he would have been when he saw the brown stain on the wall and subsequently hiked up and found the cave. Anyway, G.E. Kincaid was supposedly on an exploratory expedition. I think he was looking at mining prospects. That's one of the things that he mentions in the article, was he was looking for mining prospects. It's mentioned that he had some affiliation with the Smithsonian, and later a Professor Jordan came into the picture on the subsequent visit to the cave or cavern. Now, one thing that does validate the Kincaid story, I mean, there's several things that make it sound like it's possible. But one of the things is, and I was always kind of skeptical because I've understood from an archaeological perspective as well as a geological, a paleontology perspective, that many of the caves on the Grand Canyon are full of bat guano, which is the bat droppings. There's one notable cave that had a lot of giant ground sloth droppings in it, basically, which scientists tell us are a prehistoric or ice age animal that occurred around the Ice Age and directly after. And so there's a lot of things, evidences that give us clues that we can examine that will either support or dismiss some of these theories. I will say that the elevation marker that G.E. Kincaid gave, he said that the cave was approximately 2,000 feet above the canyon floor, above the river, and about 1,400 feet down from the rim. Interestingly enough, it's in this band above 500 feet from the river and below 500 feet from the rim that both of these areas, if there's a cave within 500 feet of the rim or 500 feet of the river, those things get a lot of activity from bats and other animals. And so these caves that are close to the river where insects are at, and the bats are zooming around in the evening and at night getting the insects, and then they roost in these caves that are not too far up from the bottom, and the bats that are up on the plateaus that are feeding at night, or feeding in the evenings and at night, and then they'll fly down and go into these caves that are close to the rim. But there's not a lot of that activity in that zone in the middle, over 1,000 feet down and over 1,000 feet up. And so that's one thing that I always thought about when I heard the story of G.E. Kincaid, was why wasn't this cave completely filled with bat guano like some of the other caves? But this would explain one of the reasons why there would not be a lot of bat guano in there, because it's in a band or a zone that doesn't see a lot of activities from bats. They're just that intermediate zone. There's not as many insects. The temperatures are cooler, the winds are much stronger, and there's just not a reason for bats or birds or bobcats or mountain lions or anything that's roaming those canyons to be able to easily access them, or a real big reason to be up there. And so another evidence that I want to talk about right off the bat is at one time Lava Falls, which is right across from Vulcan's throne. If you've been out onto the north rim of the Colorado to Toro Weep, if you spend any time out there, you know what Vulcan's throne is. That's a recent lava flow that occurred around 1,000 to 1,200 years ago, and geologists tell us that that flow went down and blocked off the Colorado River and actually raised the level of the river in that, behind that lava dam, for 600 feet or more. And if that backed up the water behind a lava dam more than 600 feet, then it would back water up all the way to near Marble Canyon. And so it is entirely possible that if that water was there, if that was dammed up, then that elevation, it was possible that they could have floated a boat in there and then walked up the series of steps talked about by Kincaid in his information that he gave to the Gazette, or the Gazette author. It is, so that makes it possible that during that period of time, about 1,000 to 1,200 years ago, at least in the time from the time that dam was formed until it was washed away or eroded away, there could have been 500, 600, 700 years where that elevation could have been accessed by boat. Granted, for the water, for them to float up to that elevation all the way down by Marble Canyon, which is approximately the distance that Kincaid said he was from the El Tovar Hotel, which was a new hotel out on the edge of the rim around that time. The water would have had to have been all the way up to the rim of the Grand Canyon at Lava Falls to back it up 2,000 feet that far upriver. And so there's a few things that really need to be looked at and examined there. We don't know how the land shifted or how much of the water has been undercut. I'm not a proponent of the millions and millions of years that it took to form the Grand Canyon. I think the Grand Canyon was formed with a series of very catastrophic events. Huge bodies of water being flushed down the Grand Canyon. It just makes sense to me that a giant body of water suddenly rushing down the canyon would create this canyon 7 miles wide and 2 miles deep. Whereas if it was millions of years eroding straight down, it seems like you would have a canyon that was more like this, 2,000 to 4,000 feet straight down with a very narrow cut, not a 7 mile average width from rim to rim. It seems to me like there had to be a tremendous amount of water going down from rim to rim to erode that much of it away and create the Grand Canyon the way it is today. Anyway, I'm going to get on the internet here and pull up Google Earth and lay out the distances from that Kincaid talks about and the elevations. I'm going to show you some caves that you may not have seen before, and most of these I don't know of anybody that has been into them. And so it is entirely possible that there is a cave in the Grand Canyon that holds treasure, an ancient civilizations, where an ancient civilization lived for a period of time. We know that many of the cultures, the Native American cultures, talk about an emergence. It talks about a time when they were living underground and then they emerged and came out from the ground. And so many of these areas, these areas from many of these cultures center on the Grand Canyon. Okay, I want to show you some interesting things here on Google Earth. You can see this red line coming up the river. This is the measurement that I took, the 42-mile marker from El Tovar Hotel upriver to where Kincaid said that he saw the brown stain on the wall, and hiked up and found the cave on the east wall of the canyon. So this side is the east. This is the east wall. This is actually the street view. This is actually photographs of the river. But what's interesting is I can come to this point and see street view and other points on the river, but in this next section for a mile or so, it's an area that it does not give a street view. It won't show me a street view. It will not allow me to see photographs of the river, which I find strange, especially since this is the region, one of those regions that you can't camp in. You're not supposed to get out of your boat. You're not supposed to be able to explore. And we don't have any photography on Google Earth or any good photos from the satellite view. The satellite view is different than the photo view. Let's exit street view for a minute here. See, that's going to take us straight up above the river. Okay, here's where 42 miles take us. There's actually a small cave in, let's go down here, there's actually a small cave in street view you can see right here. But it doesn't match the elevation marker because it's only 200 feet above the river. In fact, there's the cave right there. We need to go down the river a little bit further here. And we can look back at it. There's a better view of the cave right there. And I don't know what this little exclamation point is right there. It's very interesting. Never seen that on in Street View or any of these other views. This is just showing you where you're at on the river. It's kind of your pointer, but there's a view of that cave right there. Let's see if we can go downriver a little further and look back at that a little bit better. Okay, there's a better view of the cave. Right here. That's a pretty substantial cave. In fact, it looks like steps. It looks like steps coming up here to this into this cave. It's very interesting, but if we take our tools, we get a ruler, It's not going to give me the ruler, is it? Okay, well I measured it earlier when I wasn't in Street View, and it was actually a little over 200 feet in elevation. And in Kincaid's account, he says that he was 2,000 feet up from the river elevation. Well, if we look to the top, the elevation of this area is to the very, very top. It's about 3,000 feet, which would make it approximately 1,000 feet down and 2,000 feet up. Puts us in this belt right here, which you can see here. There's absolutely no way that a human could get up to this elevation in this part of the river. Well, if we go downriver and explore this a little further, let's actually use our... You watch this, the horizon there, it's just going to keep bringing me right back to the same position. It's not letting me advance down the river and see the photographs. I don't know if there isn't any. It's just bringing me right back to the same. Okay, let's exit Street View. And if I exit Street View and I come down the river here, let's come down to here. We'll go down to Street View again. It's not going to give me any photograph. Oh, it does there. Okay, let's have a look here. Okay, there's that exclamation point again. Okay, there's the cave. Is that the same cave? Yeah, there's the cave. So we've only moved a couple hundred feet down the river. So that one does look like it has steps going up. I think you could definitely get up to that one with a little difficulty. I don't think that's the cave Kincaid's talking about. All right, let's go back up the river here. Let's go maybe. Let's see how far we can go before if it'll give us Street View again. Okay, see now it's not giving us any photographic Street View. So this is in that area where you can't get out of your boat. You're not supposed to stop and camp. It's not giving you any Street View photos. Very, very interesting. You can see that they're masking the photos of the river here, so we can't see the details to see how you could get up, or if there's any brown stains that stand out, or if there is any caves visible. Very interesting. Okay, let's exit ground level again. Okay. Some interesting formations I'd like to be able to see, but it's not going to let me. Alright, let's go to the area where one of the areas I highly suspected. Now, let's have a look at this one here. Okay, there's a road that comes out to there. Or no, that's a drainage. Okay, that's going to be quite a waterfall, but this would be an area if you're coming down the river, you could look up and actually see something. Let's see if we've got a Street View from here. Okay, we're back out of that zone. There's actually somebody on a raft right there. Look at that. Let's get back and see what we got here. That's not going to show us the focus. It's not going to focus on us. Oh, that's really weird. Alright. And there's somebody's head from the Street View. Interesting. Alright, so we're back into the area where we can... Okay, look at the caves in this. Okay, you've got all kinds of formations. You've got caves here. You've got some caves here. And granted, most of these caves you probably can't get in. See if we can look back. It's a really interesting rock formation right there. Almost looks like it's been carved. Look at these formations in here. They almost look like steps. But this is part of the area. That's a pretty significant cave right there. This is part of the area you're not supposed to get out of the raft, and I don't understand that. I don't know how they can keep you from doing that. It's navigable waters. It's legally navigable waters. Looks like we've got some more caves here. It's going to give us a view up there. It doesn't let us zoom in, so it's really hard to do anything in this street view. Let's look at this cave. See, that's a pretty significant cave right there. But no way to get into it without rappelling off the top. There's the raft. There's the guys on the raft right there that was in our photograph. This is the west wall. I don't know why they've got these I'm starting to see these exclamation points. I don't know if that's a danger spot, a spot you're supposed to watch for on the river. There's one right there. Maybe it's rocks under the water. Alright, let's proceed up the river a little further. I want to get to this alcove here and see if we can see anything. There's some more rafts. Oh, see, it takes us out of took us out of the view. We're getting to another area where they don't want you to get out, photograph for some reason, but looks like the rafts can get out right there, so maybe that's not what's caused maybe they just don't have the photographs listed in the record. I don't know. You can see some significant human trails along here. So this is an area that if people could actually get to a cave, they would actually have explored them already. Let's exit this ground level. I want to show you where one of the areas that I felt like is the best possibility. I go the wrong direction. Yeah, we're going back upriver. This is okay. There's where 42 miles ends. This is the spot where I felt like was significant location. You've got an alcove, so when you're coming down the river, you could look up and see there's a nice geological outcropping right here that it's a definite rusty brown stain that would interest a geologist. The mileage is about 35 miles. It's not 42, but I don't know how Kincaid figured his mileage. I don't understand how he did that accurately back in 1907. Okay, this is a Quongut, I believe, rapids. Let's go down here to street level. Okay, is it going to give us a good photograph? Okay, maybe not. It didn't. Let's see if we can find where we're at here. Let's exit ground level. Let's go below the falls. Okay. Okay, now we can see this formation right here. This formation right here that's a significantly darker brown stain than anything in the surrounding picture, the photography. That would definitely, to a geologist, look like an outcropping that could be mineralized. It comes all the way down this wall right here and into this formation. This is an area that actually matches the Kincaid description, because from the river to right there is 1,400 feet, and or 2,000 feet, and from that formation to the top right there is actually 1,400 feet. And that's precisely what he says in the article. That's precisely what it says in the article that was written by the Gazette. Now, it would be hard to get to this formation. You have to come up this slope, around the backside of this hill, and when you get on top, you could come down and around this alcove on the level, and you could actually get over into this formation. There's another possible way, is down beyond this point right here. I think you can come around and come up to the level and around. And honestly, if you're coming down the river and you notice this formation, it's going to be a lot more likely that you're going to go on past it and stop and try to find a way back up to it than you're going to stop here and go back up river, especially since this is one of the small rapids on the river that you would have to navigate to get through, and it'd be very difficult to get to the shore before this rapid. You would not see this formation prior to this rapid. You would be almost to the bottom of it when you would notice it, so you would be able to float on down when the water gets calm, come over to the edge, and then find a way up. So it's much more likely he went around this point and back up and then around to this formation looking at this brown stain. So this is one location that absolutely fits the Kincaid model, or the Kincaid's description. And I'm not even sure if you can get up and around this or not. Google Earth, it's hard to tell. It seems like you could. I mean, it's pretty mild here. You can get around, and then when you get from the street view, you're back looking down on it with Google Earth, and it's hard to tell, even with a topo map, without actually being there and trying it to see if you could get up there. But you could see these rapids. And you would actually not see that formation until you get through these rapids to the point where I'm at right here, that you would actually have a good view, because it would be more like this point would be back behind this point further up. And then as you come down, it would actually swing around and give you a full view of this formation right here. Okay. I want to exit street view. We're going to go back past this point. Okay, so here's that same thing, and you can see how much different it looks on Google Earth than it does in the actual photo. So you would, if you were to come out before the rapids, you could, in theory, come up this formation, come up around through here, come up and around this, come up and around this formation, make your way around this alcove, around this formation at the elevation, and come over into this brown stain, this stained formation here. Now there very easily could be caves anywhere along here because of the type of formation that this is. This is all made up of limestone. Limestone is very prone to erosion. Now here's the top. You can see the plateau. Okay, so if we come down to the other possible way to get to this formation, would be right up this formation and around like this. So the trail would actually, you'd come around, and then possibly down here. Let's go there and have a look back. You get a much better view in ground level. Come on, you gonna give me a photograph? No, I'm not gonna do it there. But you can see that it's possible. I mean, it's broken enough and gradual enough that it looks like you could come up the rock right there. It's like you could come right up to this rock, come up to the elevation, and work your way around. I'm going to see if I can get a better view of this. Let's exit the ground level again. For some reason, it doesn't want to give you the photographs unless you're facing downriver. So let's face downriver. Get into the street view. Is it going to give me a photograph? Street view? Oh. So this may be one of those zones where they are not giving you any information. But you can see it's possible coming up through this cut that you could get up, come around, work your way up high enough, and then come around on that level and get around to the other side of that formation. But here's where I think the best possibility of the Kincaid cave is. It matches all the description. It's got this outcropping formation that geologists look for. It has the limestone formation. It's at the right elevation. It looks very cavey. It looks like there's lots of overhangs and stuff in here. I don't see any trails. I mean, there could be a slight trail around here. I don't see anything that represents or looks like a staircase. We see some interesting anomalies here with the almost looks like stacked rocks in a line. It's kind of interesting. But once again, unless you have an actual photograph, the Google Earth just does not have the detail. It's masked, and they can take things off of Google Earth very easily if it's an area they don't want you to see. So that's just a quick rundown of Google Earth. This is about 35 miles down. If we actually go to the 42 miles, we have a view of some caves, but we do not have a view of this section of the river right here. It's one of those areas they are not allowing people to stop, which makes it highly suspect to me. Let's check this real quick. I want to look at this for a second. You're down far enough that I don't know that you would see. Okay. Alright, if you were right here, you could see some of the corners. But a lot of these places on the river, it's impossible to be able to see anything except for directly above your head. This is another spot they're not going to give you any photographs. I don't know if they do that on purpose or if that's by design. Let's look here. Let's try that. That looks like an interesting spot there. Okay, that gives us a great view. Okay, this is very rugged. You could easily climb up here to within 2,000 feet of the top. Look how rough that is and broken. You could easily, actually, I think you could climb out of the Grand Canyon right there. You got an easy slope right here. That's very broken. I don't see a geological, there's a stain there, but I don't think you'd be going to that. That doesn't look like an outcropping. It's an interesting spot. It's a spot you may be able to climb out of the canyon, which is unusual. Let's look at the other side. Might be a little cave right there. There's a exclamation point. Must be a rock under the water. But yeah, this is very, very broken all the way to the top of what you can see. Let's exit the street level and have a look at it. Very broken and gradual as the Grand Canyon goes. Yeah, that's very interesting. Broken up. You could probably actually get out of the Grand Canyon right there. Oh, don't do that to me. Yeah, that looks like you could actually get out of there. Wow. So that's possible. Possible that this could be a possible location where Kincaid could have got out. This would be really easy to access. He describes it as not being very easy, but comparatively speaking, that's definitely one of the easier places on the Grand Canyon to be able to climb up. I'm going to actually put a pin there. They call that Tatahotsoya wash. Tatahotso. So yeah, Tatahosa wash. So right here by Tatahosa wash, it looks like you could get out. You know, maybe you can, maybe you can't. At least you can get up into here. I don't know if you could rim it, get out on top, rim out, but you can definitely get up to that elevation, that 2,000 foot mark. I'm going to actually drop a pin there. Call it a climb up. Formation of a Tatahasa wash. There's that formation that we're looking at. You can see the shadow of it right there. Alright, enough of the Google Earth exercise there. You can see where I've traced it down the river from the El Tovar. There's the El Tovar Hotel. El Tovar Hotel. There's the Grand Canyon. This is the rim. You can look down into the Grand Canyon from right here. And then I measured it up for backup canyon, 42 miles. There's the one of the best possible places. And this is actually the 42-mile mark with the little cave on the side. Okay, I'm going to read this document here. This is called Explorations in the Grand Canyon. Mysteries of immense high caverns being brought to light. Jordan is enthused. Remarkable find indicate ancient people migrated from Orient. The latest news of the progress of the exploration of what is now regarded by scientists as not only the oldest archaeological discovery in the United States, but one of the most valuable in the world, which is mentioned some time ago in the Gazette, was brought to the city yesterday by G.E. Kincaid, the explorer who found the great underground citadel of the Grand Canyon during a trip from the Green River, Wyoming down the Colorado in a wooden boat to Yuma several months ago. According to the story related to the Gazette by Mr. Kincaid, the archaeologists of the Smithsonian Institute, which is financing the expeditions, have made discoveries which almost conclusively prove that the race which inhabited this mysterious cavern, hewn in solid rock by human hands, was of Oriental origin, possibly from Egypt, tracing back to Ramses. Well, the Orient and Egypt is not the same thing, so the newspaper got that messed up. If their theories are borne out by the translation of the tablets engraved with hieroglyphics, the mystery of the prehistoric peoples of North America, their ancient arts, who they were, and whence they came will whence they came will be solved. Egypt and the Nile, and Arizona and the Colorado will be linked by a historical chain running back to ages which stagger the wildest fancy of the fictionist. A thorough examination under the direction of Professor S.A. Jordan, the Smithsonian Institute, is now prosecuting the most thorough explorations which will continue until the last link of the chain is forged. Nearly a mile underground, about 1,480 feet below the surface, the long main passage has been delved into to find another mammoth chamber from which radiate scores of passageways like the spokes of a wheel. Several hundred rooms have been discovered, reached by passageways running from the main passage, one of them having been explored for 854 feet and another for 634 feet. The recent find includes articles which have never been known as native to this country, and doubtless they have their origin in the Orient. War weapons, copper instruments, sharp-edged and hard as steel, indicating a high state of civilization reached by these strange people. So interested have the scientists become that preparations are being made to equip the camp for extensive studies, and the force will be increased to 30 or 40 persons. Mr. Kincaid's report. Mr. Kincaid was the first white child born in Idaho and has been an explorer and hunter all his life. 30 years having been in the service of the Smithsonian Institute. Even briefly recounted, his history sounds fabulous, almost grotesque. It's an interesting use of words. First, I would impress that the cavern is nearly inaccessible. The entrance is 1,486 feet down the sheer canyon wall. It is located on government land, and no visitor will be allowed there under penalty of trespass. Well, it's not government land, it's called public land. It's owned by the U.S. public. The scientists wish to work unmolested without fear of archaeological discoveries being disturbed by curio or relic hunters. A trip there would be fruitless and the visitors would be sent on his way. The story of how I found the cavern has been related, but in a paragraph. I was journeying down the Colorado River in a boat, alone, looking for minerals. Some 42 miles up the river from El Tovar Crystal Canyon, I saw on the east wall stains in the sedimentary formation, about 2,000 feet above the riverbed. There was no trail to this point, but I finally reached it with great difficulty. Above a shelf, which hid it from view from the river, was the mouth of the cave. There are steps leading from this entrance some 30 yards to what was, at the time the cavern was inhabited, the level of the river. When I saw the chisel marks on the wall inside the entrance, I became interested, secured my gun, and went in. During that trip, I went back several hundred feet along the main passage till I came to the crypt in which I discovered the mummies. One of these I stood up and photographed by flashlight. I gathered a number of relics which I carried down the Colorado to Yuma, from whence I shipped them to Washington with details of the discovery. Following this, the explorations were undertaken. The passages. The main passage is about 12 feet wide, narrowing to 9 feet towards the further end. About 57 feet from the entrance, the first side passages branch off to the right and left, along which on both sides are a number of rooms about the size of ordinary living rooms of today, though some are 30 by 40 feet square. These are entered by oval-shaped doors and are ventilated by round open spaces through the walls into the passages. The walls are about 3 feet 6 inches in thickness. The passages are chiseled or hewn as straight as could be laid out by an engineer. The ceiling of many rooms converge to a center. The side passages near the entrance run at sharp angles from the main hall, but towards the rear they gradually reach a right angle in direction. The shrine. Over 100 feet from the entrance is a cross hall several hundred feet long, in which are found the idol or image of the people's gods sitting cross-legged with a lotus flower or lily in each hand. Okay, so that's not Egyptian. That's from India or Buddhism. The cast of the face is Oriental, and carving this cavern. The cast of the face is Oriental, and the carving this cavern. I don't get that. The idol almost resembles Buddha, though the scientists are not certain as to what religious worship it represents. Taking into consideration everything found thus far, it is possible that this worship most resembles the ancient people of Tibet. Okay, so that's not... So far, what I see from this article is it's pretty much written just the same way as the media today would write it. They would jumble up 2 or 3 civilizations and put them all in the same article for effect. Okay, back to the passage before my battery went dead. Okay, the cast of this face is Oriental, and the carving of this cavern, I'm going to say they're missing a few words, but it should be the carving of this cavern the same. The idol almost represents Buddha, though the scientists are not certain to which religion it represents. Taking into consideration everything found thus far, it is possible this worship most resembles the ancient people of Tibet. Okay, so Tibet is not the Egyptians. Surrounding this idol are smaller images, some very beautiful in form, others crook-necked and distorted shapes, symbolically probably of good and evil. There are 2 large cactuses with protruding arms, one on each side of the dais on which the god squats. All of this is carved out of the rock, resembling marble. In the opposite corner of this cross hall were found tools of all descriptions made of copper. These people undoubtedly knew the lost art of hardening this metal, which has been sought by chemicals for centuries without result. On a bench running through the workroom was some charcoal and other materials probably used in the process. There is also slag and stuff similar to mat, showing that the ancients smelted ores, but so far no trace of where or how this is done has been discovered, nor the origin of the ore. I find that comment a little interesting, since Kincaid hiked up to the location supposedly to look at a formation that was supposed to have minerals in it. Among the other finds are vases or urns and cups of copper and gold, made very realistic, artistic in design. The pottery work includes enameled wares and glazed vessels. Another passageway leads to granaries such as are found in Oriental temples. They contain seeds of various kinds. One very large storehouse has not yet been entered, as it is 12 feet high and can be reached only from above. 2 copper hooks extend on the edge, which indicate that some sort of ladder was attached. These granaries are rounded, as the materials of which they are constructed, I think, is a very hard cement. A gray metal is also found in this cavern, which puzzles the scientists, for its identity has not yet been established. It resembles platinum, strewn promiscuously over the floor. Everywhere are what people call cat eyes, a yellow stone of no great value. Each one is engraved with the head of a Malay type. The hieroglyphics. On the urns or walls over the doorway and tablet stones were found by the images are mysterious hieroglyphics, the key to which the Smithsonian Institute hopes yet to discover. The engravings on the tablet probably have something to do with the religion of the people. Similar hieroglyphics have been found in southern Arizona. Among the pictorial writings, 2 animals are found. One is of a prehistoric type. Okay, that's all I'm going to read, and if you want to read the rest of the article, I'll put it in the link down below. You can do some your own research, but basically it just goes on to tell about a little bit more about this and the supposed find. if I had to decide without any further evidence, I would probably say this newspaper article was a hoax. However, there are some things that make this possible. The location, the formation, the elevations, the fact that we know that it's possible that the lava flow had covered the canyon and backed up the water to the elevation to where they could have accessed this area by boat. That makes this more believable. The elevation in between, which means that it wouldn't necessarily be overridden by bats and other animals, makes it more believable. But whether or not this is the same quote-unquote cavern or treasure trove that's of the Aztecs or of some other people, we don't really know. But if I was just to go out on a limb and give my personal opinion of this article, I would say that it's probably a hoax, even though there are many, many caves and caverns along the Grand Canyon that have been unexplored. There are also areas along the Grand Canyon that you're not supposed to go. You're not supposed to stop your raft and get out and explore. The Park Service gives the reasons as archaeological ruins, delicate wildlife, and geological sites that are like special to the Native Americans, or prehistoric sites that have not been documented. We know they've found fossils, many fossilized bones in different caves and different sites along the Grand Canyon. So the Park Service and the government really hasn't done anything to allay this suspicion or make people less suspicious about their intentions. Okay, I'm going to be reading my notes now as I continue with the information about Kincaid. There's so much information that I didn't want to miss any of the details, and since I'm trying to make this video all-encompassing the Aztec treasure cave, the possible Kincaid treasure cave, and these evidences that point to this area on the Grand Canyon, as well as the emergence legend of the Hopi and the Zuni. I want to get my information straight, and so I've written a dialogue here I'm going to read, and then I'll put some photos up so that you don't have to sit here and stare at my balding gray head. Okay. Even though, as I mentioned, there is a possibility that the G.E. Kincaid article in the newspaper was a hoax for readership, there are some things that place the Smithsonian under suspicion for denying the story or that G.E. Kincaid ever worked for them. Through genealogical research, we have identified both a G.E. Kincaid from the area in Idaho that the article mentions that Kincaid was from. We have also found an S.A. Jordan, and I'm going to put photos of these individuals in the video. We also have evidence of government expeditions into the forbidden zones in the Colorado River. And so we have individuals that have rafted the river, that have found these old government camps and places along the river in these areas where the government actually launched expeditions from. I'm going to read from the Park Service's own website why these caves and cave systems that they call the karst system along the Colorado River, why they are closed to the public, and why there are specific regions along the Colorado River that it is forbidden that you stop and camp or explore. Okay, this is from the National Park Service .gov website. The cave karst system of the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon caves are unique resources with fragile environments that provide habitat for a range of cave-dwelling wildlife, including sensitive bat species. Many caves also play a major role in regional hydrology, as evidenced by incredible waterfalls and substantial streams emerging from places like Vases, Paradise, Chavia Falls, Roaring Thunder, and Tapete Springs. Under the current park policy, all caves are currently closed to visitation except for research purposes. And then it has a contact number for additional information. It says, please contact Rhonda Newton, Research Coordinator, for additional information, 928-638-7447. Cave monitoring. It shows a picture of some graffiti carved in a cave, and this really does make me angry too. This engraving was scratched in a Grand Canyon cave. Unfortunately, due to the unique preservative quality of caves, this mark is irreversible. Dealing with unauthorized access, caving in the park is illegal. It is one of the biggest problems the cave management staff of the park's physical sciences program deals with in Grand Canyon National Park. And I agree with them on this aspect. You leave the caves open, you're going to have assholes carving their names in them. It's just inevitable. There's always one in every group. It's unfortunate. The caves of the Grand Canyon National Park represent a unique and fragile resource. Mineral formations, fossil bones of extinct animals, and prehistoric artifacts have been found in the Grand Canyon caves. These resources are non-renewable and have both scientific and aesthetic value. In order to evaluate man-caused impacts to Grand Canyon caves, there is an established monitoring program in the park. What is this monitoring program? I don't know. Is that just an idle threat? Do they fly their helicopters and their airplanes past the portals once a day? I really couldn't tell you. The one problem I do have with this, with them just blocking off all the caves and the caverns in the Grand Canyon, is this. Those do not belong to the U.S. government. Those caves and caverns belong to the U.S. public. They're part of the public land. They're part of our national park system. The Park Service and the National Park System should be actively investigating, studying, and displaying the information and artifacts that they find in the caves to the public. It should be in our public domain. It should not be left hidden away to molder into the dust of time. That's one of the problems I have. There are many universities, there are graduate programs. There's so much federal funding out there that's going to waste. Why not use some of this funding, allow some of these graduate students, some of these universities to research and find out what's in these caves and present it to mankind in an honest and objective format? Why does there have to be so much disinformation, dishonesty, and mistrust because they are unwilling to allow the public to know and see what's in these caves? Who cares what's in there? Let's make it part of our history and for the coming generations so that this can be a lasting legacy about the true history of this country. The problem is there's a narrative, and that narrative is that this earth is millions and billions of years old and that man emerged from the ocean as a snail, crawled up on land, started breathing, developed lungs, legs, limbs, all these branches of land animals and flying creatures and insects evolved, and man is now the highest member or order of this species. This is a bunch of horse shit. We all know it. Anybody that has any common sense, mathematicians now have proven through the scientific methods that the mutations, the rate at which mutations that are successful occur when they've done the mathematical theories, there is not enough time or space in the universe for those mathematical theories to ever allow for evolution to have occurred. The odds are much too great. It's mathematically impossible for evolution to have occurred. And scientists are now starting to understand that, and so they're not continuing to investigate. When DNA studies and DNA evidence came out, it was supposed to be the newest, greatest, latest solve-all to the history of evolution and to answer all the questions of the origins of mankind. But what started happening is all this evidence started to lead back right to the evidence of the common Bible. All the genealogies, all the information, all the migrations and the routes were proving the things that were in the Bible. And all of a sudden, the study of DNA went away, except for forensics in crime and ancestral DNA genealogy. You will not ever find scientists today actively studying the man's genetic background, because that information inevitably disproves science. It is absolutely kills science, and so they have completely 100% backed off of the DNA studies. Okay, moving along now. Okay. So in light of the government propaganda we see today in almost every aspect of life, a denial or dismissal of any topic or subject is almost equal to admitting an occurrence or an event. So the government has been proved wrong so many times that when they deny something, in my mind and in the minds of many people, it actually proves that their denial is actual fact. How many times have we seen things stated as absolute fact to later be absolute fiction, or something said to be absolute fiction turns out to be factual? This in and of itself, it gives credibility to the Kincaid story. I know of hundreds and hundreds of things that the Smithsonian has absolutely denied and even destroyed the evidence of. And one of these things, and I've mentioned it in a previous video, is the evidence of the giants. The bones, the DNA evidence, the burials, the mummies that have been found all over this country and have been covered up and disappeared into the basements of the Smithsonian. We have verifiable evidence that at one time the Smithsonian took a shipload of artifacts out into the middle of the ocean and dumped them to hide the evidence of what they had recovered. And that's beyond sickening. The other interesting phenomena in this area along the Grand Canyon is the Hopi and the Zuni emergence story. Not far from the Kincaid River's measurements of 42 miles upriver from El Tovar Hotel, both in the distance and the elevation, and the formations that they claim the location of their emergence from underground is, coincides to the same general area of the Kincaid story and of possible Aztec treasure cave. This seems too big of a coincidence to just ignore. We have actual living Zuni and Hopi tribal elders that will tell you with absolute certainty, with absolute belief, that their tribe emerged from the Simpapu area along the Little Colorado River. That's not very far from the Kincaid cave, according to his information. It's also not very far as the crow flies from where a Paiute tribal elder told me that the Aztec treasure cave that they were left to guard is located. How do all these things end up in one location? It seems a little bit coincidental and unbelievable, but that's where we're at. Okay, so I get back into another intriguing factor is a potential Aztec connection. Cortez and later Coronado, following myth, legend, or factual history, attempted to trace the Aztec to their past homeland and their potential treasure cache. Both these attempts seem to halt at the rim of the Grand Canyon, either because of the difficulty of the descent and crossing of the Grand Canyon or because the trail merely disappeared. I'm going to put a photo in here of the Aztec, of the 7 cities and the emergence of the Aztec. The Aztec have their own emergence story. They talk about Otzatlan or Cibola, the 7 caves or cities where treasure, sometimes referred to as religious artifacts or records, were once contained, or possibly still lie today. Interestingly enough, the local tribes that live near the Grand Canyon, the Paiutes to the north, and the Havasupai and Wallapai to the south, tell of a tribe that once inhabited the area and left something in caves underground that their ancestors were left to guard and protect. Were these groups once part of the Aztec society? Were these individuals left to keep their secrets safe? Have their descendants lost the location of this secret or just refuse today to reveal the secret location? Okay, so do they still know the location or has it been lost to their generations of time? We know these groups of natives speak a type of the Aztec language. The way archaeologists and ethnologists trace tribes' ancient origins is through language study called linguistics. Linguistics is one method used to trace origins. Indeed, the Uto-Aztec linguistics can be traced to the Grand Canyon region, north into Utah, and these Uto-Aztec groups radiate out like the lines of a wheel spoke from northern Utah, the Grand Canyon, and the Four Corners Corridor region. All of these are possible Aztec origin areas based on linguistics of the existing tribes today. So when you have a major culture that exists in an area and they leave, inevitably some of the group stays behind or have spread out like the spokes of a wheel and taken with them their linguistics, the religion, the traditions, or some of the cultural things from the main group. Eventually some of those things may die out over time, but the linguistics almost always stay fairly accurate and traceable back to the origins. Further study has gone into tracing the cultivated plants the Aztec people, now called the Nahu, brought with them to Mexico when they settled there in the 1300s. These plant species, mainly the corn species, have been traced into northern Utah and around the Grand Canyon region to the groups that civilized, or to the groups that cultivated these plants. In other words, when archaeologists are digging into ruins and they find a corn kernel or a corn on the cob, they can match the DNA and determine what type of corn that is and where it came from. They have files of plants, and studies have been entirely donated, or plant studies have been entirely dedicated to finding and tracing these plant species. And the plant species of the Aztec come right back to Utah and the Four Corners region and the Grand Canyon area. This is the homeland of the Aztec. It is also interesting to note the Kincaid report describes finding a huge cache of seeds in pots in the caverns. Today, these seeds could also be traced to the places of their origin. This would be very important to know, to understand, and to study. One of the things I mentioned earlier that we should be engaged in is studying these caves and caverns and finding the information that they hold for us today from history. Were the treasure caves of the Aztec separate from the Kincaid caves? Are they the same? Why do the Hopi and Zuni legend focus on the same area as the Kincaid legend and close to that of the Aztec legend? What is going on here in this area? Why is it a forbidden zone enshrouded in government red tape and regulation? What does the government know that they're not telling us? Dan Lowe, a fellow colleague of mine and good friend, has done extensive research on the Arizona Strip area and the Utah area that the Aztec lived in historically. He spent several years linking sites that his native friends and local individuals showed him. He has made several important discoveries and prepared a possible location of the Aztec as the Uinta Basin, proposed a possible location of the Aztec origin of Otzatlan or Cibola as the Uinta Basin, an area of northeast Utah where the Spanish extracted tons of gold and silver ore that they transported via the old Spanish Trail to Mexico, possibly the same route the Aztec followed in their migration to Mexico. Is this the source of the Aztec wealth? The same rich mineralized deposits still found in concentrated pockets in this region today. Interestingly, science tells us that the Lake Uinta once covered this region, a huge inland lake or branch of the sea. Fossils of turtles, alligators, sharks, huge fish, and every imaginable marine life can be found at the benchmarks and in deposits around the area. This is also the area of the Vernal Dinosaur Museum. A lot of dinosaur bones and fossils. Huge oil deposits, and the culture center of the Fremont Indians, often attributed by some to be descendants of the Aztec. So there was a huge Fremont culture area in the Uinta Basin area. Did the Aztec once live in and around Lake Uinta? Did they learn, or did they leave when the lake suddenly drained in a catastrophic earthquake or with volcanic activity? Scientists tell us that Lake Uinta drained as a result of the Colorado Plateau uplift. If the uplift that caused the Colorado Plateau, Yellowstone, and the Rocky Mountains to emerge drained Lake Uinta, that must have been a terrifying event. If the Aztec witnessed this event, no wonder they migrated south to Mexico to escape. What happened to all the water if it rushed south towards the ocean when the Continental Divide was created? Can you imagine the destruction that an inland sea would cause if it suddenly rushed out? Huge canyons would be carved. In present day, in 1980, 500-foot canyons were carved out of solid rock in a matter of a couple of days when the melting glaciers of Mount St. Helens melted from the resulting volcano in Washington State in 1980. So huge canyons were carved 500 and 600 feet deep in a matter of a couple of days as a result of the melting glaciers and water rushing out from that volcanic eruption. Imagine an entire inland ocean going out and draining in a matter of a few days. This is my opinion of how the Grand Canyon was formed. Was some catastrophic events, not millions and billions of years and a river slowly meandering through solid rock. Okay, on to some more information. To the information I have already given, I'm going to add some additional information that gives more fire and more smoke to this region. In the 1920s, a man by the name of Freddie Crystal came up from Old Mexico, and he had in his possession a map that he had, according to the locals, he had taken or got a copy of from the Mexican archives. With this map, he began searching all over the area around Kanab, Utah. He was looking for specific, unique petroglyphs. He was searching for specific, unique petroglyphs that he believed and were shown on this map, along with the rock formations and the shapes of the canyons, he believed were going to lead him to the Aztec treasure. He had some local individuals from Kanab he had hired to help him, or who he told the story to and volunteered to help him, I don't know which. But when they got to the white ledges in Johnson Canyon, the white cliffs, the white sandstone cliffs, Freddie Crystal became very excited. He knew he had located the area of the Aztecs' treasure. Soon they found an oval cave up on the side of the sandstone cliff. The entrance was mudded up, had been blocked up with limestone and mortar. Excitedly, they began hacking away and chiseling and digging away, and they got the blocks of mortar out, and behind the blocks of mortar, the cavern was completely filled with sand. So they spent days digging and hauling the sand out, only to find another blocked entrance or a side corridor that was blocked. After a matter of weeks, Freddie enlisted, he told the story and what he was doing to the residents of Kanab, and basically they emptied the entire town, joined the search, and the entire town spent, I think, 2 summers up there in Johnson Canyon at the White Ledges, digging out this series of tunnels that were filled with sand, which were blocked up with blocks of limestone that had come from miles away, and they also, according to the records and the information we have, encountered several booby traps. Rocks fell down when they moved certain parts of the limestone mortar and rock and blocks out of the way. Big rocks fell down. And I guess at one time, Freddie Crystal's leg was pinned to the floor, and he would have been trapped there if other people weren't around and were able to help him get out from underneath the rock. Anyway, this maze just kept going, and the farmers and the ranchers and the local people in Kanab had to get back to work to take care of their fields, their crops, and I think people got tired of what was going on. They just weren't finding anything. Eventually they all quit, and it's rumored that someone killed Crystal. Somebody killed Freddie Crystal for his maps. At any rate, he disappeared, and nobody really knows his real name or where he went or where he's buried. Although there are some individuals, some of the individuals from that time in Kanab claimed that they saw that he had been killed, found him dead. Other mysterious anomalies have been found in the Kanab area. During the time, or shortly after the time, of the Freddie Crystal cave exploration, a guy by the name of Grant Child believed he had found an Aztec treasure symbol carved in the rocks above a series of lakes just north of Kanab. There's a little series of lakes that's called Three Lakes, and they've always been pretty mysterious, and they're deep. And Childs was convinced that this was an Aztec water trap. When he found this symbol that he had learned from Crystal or some of the other people, it looked like some of the petroglyphs that were on Freddie Crystal's map that he was looking for. And so Brett Childs came up with the theory that these were an Aztec water trap. And so he hired, and they got a series of divers, and they began exploring these lakes. And they found that there were indeed caverns, there were caves that went down into the cliffs on the west side of the lakes. Very mysterious and scary things started to happen to the divers. They began to feel like somebody was physically fighting with them. Some of them felt like they were being choked, or that their air hoses had been pulled off. A couple of times they got disoriented and lost their way, and a couple of divers almost died while they were exploring. And I think to this day there's probably been about 10 attempts to get into these caverns. There's a lot of information from Childs and his attempts to get in there. At one time they used some sonar, and they found the tunnel went back 80 feet before it opened up into it went back in, I think it was 100 feet before it ended up into an 80-foot chamber or cavern. And according to their information, it showed an anomaly of precious metals in there. Don't ask me how they determined that. Anyway, to this day, no one has ever been able to successfully and safely get into the end of those tunnels that go in under the water into those sandstone cliffs. At one time, a descendant of Childs literally used a core drilling unit and drilled down into the formation, and when they pulled the bit out, there was gold filings and shavings all around the bit. And the next day, and you can read this in the history of the Three Lakes, that individual died of a heart attack. And from that point forth, the family has not attempted to enter the caverns or do anything else with the Three Lakes. In fact, they have subsequently sold the Three Lakes property to Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, which is a whole nother story, but that's a group that has a non-profit organization for animals. Okay, so we have the Three Lakes mystery. Dan Lowe has also extensively studied these petroglyphs, these unique carvings that Freddie Crystal was following, that came up from Mexico all the way to southern Utah and into northern Arizona. These particular petroglyphs, some people call them water glyphs, they've been called key glyphs. Dan refers to them as navigation glyphs. These glyphs can be found nowhere else that we know of in North or South America. The only place these can be found is in a line coming up from Mexico into the region of southern Utah and northern Arizona. around Kanab and the Arizona Strip. That's the only place we've ever been able to follow these and find these. And there are hundreds of them. And I'm going to show you some pictures of what some of these look like. These are obviously navigational in purpose. They're circular, they have dots carved into them where you could stand a stick or a shadow or use a pointer. We're not exactly sure how they were used, but we know with almost certainty that they were navigation glyphs used to trace their way back from Mexico into this region. And we believe they were put here by the Aztec. Another very unique and interesting discovery, something you will never hear on the History Channel, something you will never hear from other treasure hunters, something you will never find on the internet except for from Dan Lowe or myself, is the mysterious clamshell map that Dan has meticulously over years recreated and restored. The figures and the figurines and the things that are on that stone map, so that you can look at them and kind of see what they mean and what they are. And without a doubt, this map represents the Kanab, Arizona Strip, the Grand Canyon region, and about 7 different locations that seem to indicate a cave or possibly a treasure location. I'm going to put a picture of this on the screen. This is something that Dan Lowe has done. This is something that he has meticulously through many months and over a couple of years put together to recreate so that you could actually see what this map looks like. And we're starting to unlock some of the mysteries of what we believe this map is. And we do believe that this is an Aztec treasure map to the locations of these caches. Another note that I have mentioned in other videos that I have posted is the story of Los Marias. Los Marias is an entirely different story that leads up to this same area, this same region. And a Mexican man and his wife came up from old Mexico in the 1980s and approached a friend of mine and Dan's who has now passed away. This man's name was Steve Schaefer. Steve Schaefer had written many treasure books. Steve was an archaeologist by trade, by schooling, and he had written many different books on history and on lost treasure in the Spanish. This couple came up from Mexico in the early 1980s. They hired Steve Schaefer to try to help them find some information that they were looking for, and they had a map and a waybill. They had a map and an informational document that was passed down to them through their family from relatives that was supposed to lead to a cache site, to a cave. Inside that cave, there was supposed to be additional information that would tell about or lead to another cave, not the small treasure left by their ancestor, but another cavern that had a treasure larger than any known to man. And that is an actual quote translated from the Old Mexican, the Old Spanish, a treasure larger than any known to man. The directions to this cave or cavern were included in the cache of the Indian Pedro Jose Salazar. We have found many of the landmarks and the features that lead to the smaller cache, but we have not found the smaller cache or cave to this day. We feel like we're getting close. We feel like we've got close. But this is an entirely different story coming in from an entirely different angle that points to almost the same exact area, a different witness saying that there's a large cache or treasure cavern in the area of the Grand Canyon. So when you add up all those witnesses, all those individuals, and put together that information, it is hard to deny that there is something there in the Grand Canyon. Whether it was an underground city from a time when the civilizations of the natives had to go underground to escape the volcanic activity, or to hide from their enemies, or from the elements of nature, and whether they later emerged, leaving behind some of their treasures, some of their history, some of their writings, and moved on to better things, it remains to be seen. I hope that at some point in history we can take an honest look that the governments and the powers that be will no longer be trying to keep information away from history, so that we can learn from history and not make the same mistakes of the past, and so this information can be preserved. And it is actually the treasure hunters and the individuals that are investing in treasure hunting and searching themselves that are making these discoveries today. It is not our government, it is not archaeologists. Much of the research has come to a halt. And you might want to question and ask why. Why has this research and these things come to a halt? I don't know the answer to that, but I know that if anything is ever found or discovered, it's probably going to be from a private individual, and it's probably going to be from private researchers and efforts of individuals like myself, like Dan Lowe, and so we're constantly looking for people to get involved in different ways with different talents and abilities, with financing. It's very expensive. It's getting even more expensive with fuel prices and our economy and our goods and services and our systems that are collapsing from poor politics and poor management. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on doom and gloom. I hope you've got something out of this information, something additional from the other information that's out there on the Grand Canyon caverns, the Aztec, and some of these things that all seem to come to a crossroads right here on the Arizona Strip, the southern part of Utah, and the shores, the rim and the canyon of the Grand Canyon.